Hello, Acolytes. It's Buddy here. Welcome to what I learned this week. Been an interesting week. You had GTC out in the valley with NVIDIA and getting on stage and talking about the greatest widgets around. You had Bezos basically saying he's going to buy every legacy factory and turn it into an AI-generated manufacturing facility, which I think is actually pretty interesting. And then, of course, I wrote a nice little St. Patrick's Day missive to all my friends in the AI world. And I even threw a little bit of reference out there for Old Head Golf Course, which was ranked one of the greatest places I've ever played. And talked about a lot of things, mostly including what we're starting to see here is really outcome-based contracts. People are fed up with paying for service providers and consultants. What they want is they want the service provider and the consultant to bring them the idea and execute. And, over the years, you've had great companies like Accenture and IBM and many others, Deloitte. All of these companies have done mixtures of that, some strategy, some implementation, infrastructure, applications, driving different types of ways to leverage technology for business. Now with AI, a lot of companies are finding out that I don't need an army of 10,000 guys to come in and run my mainframe, which is what you saw with Anthropic and COBOL a couple of weeks ago. And so what you're starting to see is a shift where outcome-based contracts is really, it's holding both the client and the vendor accountable. And so what you got is a lot of the emergence that's coming up of this AI tsunami that we've been talking about is really acting out much faster than most people have anticipated. A lot of companies are having to pivot. You've got both on the procurement side where these people are looking at how do I do an outcome-based contract because I know I have to do it because my CFO is saying, why do I want to spend 48-month contract of IBM running my mainframe or Kyndryl or DXC or Accenture when I can actually just have somebody come in, use AI, code it, and deliver the results very quickly. There's a lot of transition in how that comes out. There's a lot of different variables in terms of how you can do that. But what the big picture is that it's forcing businesses and people to actually hold each other accountable, where you have a salesman come in and says, I'm gonna, and then you have a delivery guy that has to do. And everyone says what they're gonna do, but always look for the guys that do what they say. And that's one of the really great things that has come out over the last 3 months of the AI tsunami that we've been experiencing. What it really is doing is it's forcing results over what I call bureaucracy or the haircuts that I talk about. You're going to have to be very accountable in everything you do, whether it's in sales or whether it's in delivery or whether it's in producing those outcomes. And that hits the entire side of both sides of the desk. So a lot of the people that are spending time looking at reports and slide decks and going to meetings about meetings, that you're just not going to be able to sustain. One of the things that came out of GTC last week is the speed. You have to be able to move very fast, even faster than not big business, small business, or anything. You have to move fast as a computer. And so what that means is that the companies out there, a lot of people have talked about this Goldman winners and losers list. But to me, that's going to be a sliding scale list because I think some people are going to get off it and on it and off it and on it, depending on how quickly they can execute on these new models. I think that for a guy like me, I think the best part is, who's been on both sides of this as a customer and a vendor, is that I actually can go into a client, look them straight in the eye and say, I can do this, I will do this, it impacts your EBITDA, I will reduce this cost, I will increase that cost, and if I don't, you don't have to pay me anything. But if I do, I increase your EBITDA by X percent, I get a piece of that. And so do my salespeople, and more importantly, my delivery people. They're all invested in the success. So it makes everyone invested in each other's success versus I put it one over on a salesperson or vice versa. The salesperson puts it over on the client. That's over. You can absolutely, with transparency and governance. Another thing, Omniverse is a great way to track this. It forces transparency, it forces results, and it forces both companies to have to work together. You can't sit there and say, hey, you didn't give me this information, Mr. Client. You have to open up the kimono and you have to be able to show these are all my problems. What are you going to do with your agents to make this work? And on the flip side, salesmen can't come in there and predict, oh, we're gonna make you $1 trillion. No, we're gonna be able to look at your business outcomes, your historical data in terms of your operations from whether it's manufacturing, whether it's delivery, supply chain, business process offerings, and knowing that, hey, you're spending X dollars that I've just eliminated like that. And you're gonna be able to shift your head count from people that read reports to now basically those people are going to have to be the ontologists and the brains and the taste and the ethics and the ability to really understand the tribal knowledge. When I wrote about ontology a few weeks ago, this is the real value humans bring. And so when you have all these doomers that say that Terminators are going to kill everybody, or they're going to put everyone out of business, or on the flip side, you're going to have robots are going to do everything, that's not true. Okay? You're going to basically be doing higher level work than just the drudgery. And so that's probably what I've seen the most come out of over the past week or two. When it comes to GTC, for example, this week, it was kind of like as I have to take papers because they have so many, I love how they name this stuff. When I was at IBM, it was all, they'd take a company like SoftLayer and then just call it like XYZ Cloud or something. But what you've got is they released a lot of new products. Juan gets up there. You've seen the market. You've got all this backlog. You've got a lot of manufacturing of chips and stuff that are coming. But what's really neat is all these things that came out this week just in general were, in the case of Cosmos, you've got robots are ready to work. And they're ready to work on things so you can go do better stuff. And you can manage those robots. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to unleash your creativity in your workforce. And more importantly, those people are going to be accountable. They're going to be accountable to the mission. And so that's what's really interesting. The other stuff that came back from GTC is speed. Again, speed is so important. But don't get focused on the shiny objects and the widgets. It's what can it do, especially if you own a company. What can it do to your EBITDA? What is it going to do to help you print money? Or how's it going to matter to your company? And it's going to make you be able to do things better, faster, get closer to your clients. So it really comes down to, again, what I'm more talking about. It's more about culture. It's more about what and why versus the how. And so that's probably to me was the biggest takeaway. Speed is really important, but you have to also know what you're speeding at. You don't want to throw stuff against a wall. You want to be able to observe and orient. And then if you can't make decisions and you can't act, then what's the point? Okay? So these tools that have been produced over the last few years, whether it's an Anthropic or a Grok, a Copilot, what have you, even these robots or bus dynamic robots or Skydio drones or different types of body cameras, things like that, like Axon. Speaking of, I want to give a shout out to my pal Carl Schultz for this awesome Axon taser, a Zippo lighter. Appreciate it. A company like Axon, a company like Skydio, these drones, Boston Dynamics robots are getting so advanced that they're going to be able to perform a lot of the drudgery that you're going to have out there. And so it's going to unleash your creativity. And that's where you're really going to get the real production and really the promise of AI. And so speaking of kind of the future of the factory floor, Jeff Bezos really came out this week, and I think what he's doing is a big market move. By this $100 billion fund that he's raising, he's essentially going out and buying manufacturing companies that he is going to retrofit and turn into extremely highly functional, precise, and very safe environments to manufacture at the speed of thought and at what clients want. You're going to hear a lot of doomers. It has both sides. I've already seen Bernie Sanders saying that Jeff Bezos is going to take every manufacturer job. That's not true. What he's going to be doing is he's going to be creating a lot of what the drudgery jobs are not needed. A lot of these people that work there are going to be actually adding real value, being creative, but you can't just put a robot somewhere because there's a guy in the back office that's been working on putting fetzers together or widgets, and they know where everything is and why they do it. And that's what you need. Robots don't know what a why is. They just know a how. And that's going to be the biggest shift. And that's where it's going to be really important for, regardless of what generation you come from, is what you know is now more important than how you did it. And that is going to be the real value. On the flip side, though, where we have robots that can be taken over and we've got wars going on, we've got the drones, we've got drone threats. You have things that you have to counter drone now. You look at the World Cup that's coming. Safety is going to be a big issue. Protection of life is going to be a huge issue with drones. And so who's going to be running those drones, right? Is it going to be the robots running it? Or are you going to have the robots running it, but they're basically been trained by humans and they're observed by humans? That's the thing that people need to understand. The doomers on one side, when you look at somebody like a Bernie Sanders or a Tom Cotton, and part of it is because none of them have ever worked in a real operational situation. It's just like the Industrial Revolution when you had the Luddites versus technology. Those people pivoted and adapted using the technology as a tool, not being displaced by the technology. And so that's going to be the same thing here. It's just going to happen much faster. So it's really on you to know the tribal knowledge of your enterprise, because there are reasons why somebody's been around for 100 years and they were able to pivot. Now, in the case of Blockbuster, they'd been around a while. They didn't pivot fast enough. Thought people still wanted to shop. Thought they wanted to get movie recommendations from the guy sitting behind the counter versus being able to go on Netflix and be told kind of what you like and get a sense of 5 or 6 things that you actually really like. And so that pivoted the industry. That's going to be the same thing here. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think it's going to be also interesting to watch what happens with Google and Microsoft, because everything's now going to be, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's going to be a cloud-based factory floor. Yeah, it will be. But where Amazon is interesting is on their supply chain. That's one of the things that they've been most innovative. So is FedEx. And so that to me is when you're automating and driving, that's going to be the most interesting thing to watch. I think in terms of industries where you're going to see the best optimization is going to be in manufacturing and supply chain, which means your cost of products are going to go way down. So instead of it being a $10,000 flat screen, it's going to maybe be a $1,000 flat screen. That's capitalism. That's innovation. So anyways, we'll see what goes out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure I'm going to get rants from guys like Tom Cotton who say that they should ban self-driving cars, and Bernie Sanders who thinks that everyone's going to lose their job. And then on the flip side, I'll get the Sam Altmans telling me that everything is awesome like the Legos movie. It's going to be a middle path, okay? There is going to be disruption. There is going to be inversion. But it's all ways of just using a new tool. I tell my son all the time, what AI is, you used to build a house with a hammer and I could build a house. And I was a carpenter. Well, now what happens is I've got a pneumatic hammer, and instead of hammering something once, twice, I can hammer 1,000 times. So that carpenter then becomes a home developer, and he develops 10 homes at once. And so that's what it does. It's unleashing your human creativity. And that's the way you have to look at it, and that's what you have to aspire to. So speaking of aspiring, last week I did some really interesting Boyds and haircuts around the amusement industry because my son Jack. And what was really interesting is I really dug into the amusement industry, and there's a lot of, but with the whole Bezos thing this week, I really mostly focused on manufacturing. And I saw a couple of key things that kind of stuck out. Bezos is taking what a lot of these other companies are doing, and they're doing piece parts. But some have done a really good job, and it's really impacted their revenue. And then others have actually moved too quickly on cutting too many people too quickly and realizing they're SOL. So again, that's why this middle path is so important. So my 2 Boyds of the week, one is Siemens, which is kind of interesting because Siemens Siemens is, my son loves the name, is a German company, right? A lot of people have heard them. They're an electronics manufacturer, mostly around factory automation and things like that. But as a German company, they really have been a very conservative. I've worked with them over the years. They're a very deliberate company. They move, I don't want to say slower than governments, but they're one of the slower, more deliberative companies. But what was really interesting is they started to see a huge rise in infrastructure spending around AI, which is edge computing, things in real time as AI creeps closer to the world. And so when they saw that, they oriented on a factory revamp, decided on a $165 million US expansion, plus bringing in NVIDIA Global Foundries partnership for an AI anomaly detection, and acted instantly. And that was the thing that got me about Siemens. They acted instantly. They didn't sit there and ponder and debate, which I thought was pretty fascinating. So what that really means to everyone, it means to the shareholders of Siemens, is that they raised their 2026 earnings per share outlook by 30 pence, because they're European, or 0.30 euros. Orders were up 10%, 21.4 billion. So what they did is they were able to they were manufacturing for AI, building the tools, the widgets that you need to run AI, and realized to actually use AI to build it. So they ate their own dog food. But what was really interesting is they moved just faster than the speed of market, which I think is going to be the major thing to watch over the next few years. And they ended up doing really well. It was a decisive capital deployment that resulted. Another company, Caterpillar, U.S. manufacturer. You guys have heard of them. You see them on every construction site. What they did is they started to see, this is another thing that's really interesting, especially with assets. They saw a lot of downtime across all 1.5 million of their assets. And so what they did is they oriented to predictive maintenance. And that to me is when people ask me what's a great thing about AI, it's 3 things. Find me unicorns, find me people to date, find me people to hire, find me clients that I'd talk to, find me this book that I might like, finding unicorns. You have so much data, you can do it. Second thing is optimization. How can I optimize? How can I do things better, faster, quicker? One of the examples I like to talk about is Axon. When they developed Draft One, which is for body cameras, instead of police officers having to go back to the office and spend hours filling out paperwork, they press a button on the camera and they have the police report. That puts police officers on the street for 40% more a force multiplier. So when people say, oh, we need more police officers, when you have a technology like this, you just got 40% more police officers. And then the other thing to me is what's called predictive analytics, okay? And predictive analytics can help you with maintenance, it can help you with investing, it can help you with betting on the NCAA tournament. You can use AI for that. I actually worked in my past on developing what I called Crime Nostradamus, which was a crime predictor to know where bad guys might be, or drunk drivers might be, or where wrecks might be, so you can anticipate and act. Caterpillar did this on the maintenance side. So what they ended up doing is they oriented on the predictive AI maintenance based on their history. Okay, again, that's ontology, liberal arts, history. And then what they ended up doing is they tied their contracts to KPIs. Again, that outcome-based contract. And so what ended up happening, they recorded a $17.6 billion in quarterly revenue and a $39.8 billion backlog. 33% growth in the data center power segment. Now, again, I know there's a data center boom, okay? Everyone knows that if you're in energy, all the picks and shovels for AI are coming in. That's data center and people that are building. That's part of that whole ecosystem. Other people make the power generators. Other people make cranes. Caterpillar competes with a lot of people. But the fact that they were able to hit a record quarterly revenue of $17.6 billion, mostly attributed to how they're leveraging AI to do that, that's how you use it. Now onto the haircuts, and this is something for Bernie Sanders. I've seen him a lot lately, and I'll talk about it this week. I actually listened in on a symposium at the Miller Center at UVA about how do you regulate, how do you manage AI, and you've got to manage it somehow. You can't let it run wild, or we will someday have Terminators chasing us. What's happening is it's got to be managed by humans. And what I've noticed on these three companies is they saw the promise of AI, and they ended up getting rid of all their people because they said, oh, this is great. Typical, what I call a financial haircut move in your finance department or HR department is like, hey, if we can cut X percent headcount, we're going to save dollars, because it's, if I have 10 people, now I have 3 people, I'm going to have to pay 7 less people. Well, some of these companies, their exuberance to cut people ended up cutting their own throat because you have to manage the growth. And so the first company I'm going to talk about is Dow Chemical. Okay, they've been around forever. And what they did is they observed AI potential in production. I don't think they used the predictive maintenance type of solution that Caterpillar was using. And they acted really quickly, and they slashed 4,500 jobs. Well, guess what? They ended up having a $2.6 billion net loss in 2025 with sales down 9% year over year. Their talent cliff was wasted on AI headcount reduction, and it reduced productivity. You can cut people all you want, but who's going to tell the robots how to mix chemicals to make gunpowder or cleaning supplies? The other one is kind of interesting, is the same kind of thing. Panasonic Holdings. Panasonic's a great manufacturer. They do everything. They do batteries, automotive, I mean, a lot. And what they did is they also saw this AI opportunity and went on the financial engineering and HR side, cut 12,000 jobs. And with restructuring costs of $896 million. Again, they flew over the talent cliff. That resulted in lower volume production, slowed their AI infrastructure delivery, and wasted a lot on cost cutting instead of talent investment. And then it's all that irrational exuberance that you used to always hear about during the dot-com boom. Don't get so excited about cutting people and going to robots. If you don't tell the robots what to do, and that guy's across the street with your competitor, what, is the HR person going to help the factory floor? I think not. Now on the flip side, this was one where another kind of irrational exuberance was Volkswagen, okay? And it was their CARIAD division. And essentially they saw an AI opportunity, software opportunity, really went all in on a big bang replacement. They decided to overpromise timelines. And what ended up happening is you had $7.5 billion in operating losses and repeated delays on the Porsche Macan EV and the Audi Q6 e-tron. So they actually really spent more time on the strategy and the thinking than the executing, and they under forecast on what they needed to do and then maybe take a gradual piece. So what you're seeing here is a mixture of a lot of things happening together, but it's always the human is still going to be in the driver's seat. So again, that's my rant for this week. That's what I learned. I'd love to hear if you guys have a Boyd or a haircut. Vote for the ones you heard tonight. And I'm going to finish this cigar, and hopefully, according to my bracket, the Horns are playing Gonzaga tonight. So I want to get out of here before the sun sets and hope my bracket doesn't get destroyed. And as the great football coach John Schumann, grind now and shine later.